elections, yes, I don't expect any new legislation passed between now or March. But there are two things that that come to mind immediately. One is that in the Recovery Act, also known as ARA, there are no provisions for collecting employee level data. That means that there's no way of really tracking to see at the employee level whether the Recovery Act funding is benefiting groups that are overrepresented in unemployment or underemployment, women, people of color for starters. Collecting data disaggregated by race and gender is standard. We do it. City agencies, federal agencies have to do it because of the EEO requirements, Equal Employment Opportunity Act requirements. So, and we have, advocates have spoken to the administration about issuing a simple memo that would require states, localities, corporations, nonprofit organizations that get the funding to track jobs, for the jobs created to track the race and gender of the employees that get the jobs. I think that's one easy way of measuring to see who the Recovery Act funding is actually benefiting. I mean, the other thing that I would love to see is to see the president make a strong statement similar to that made by FDR in the Second Bill of Rights, and to make the case for why we need to be talking about economic and social rights in the United States. I mean, I'm less hopeful that that will happen, but given the charges that these socialists with our healthcare reform, but I think it could be a relatively easy ask and something that he could do very effectively.
Sarah, it's a tough question because there's no easy answer. I mean, if it was as easy as passing some legislative measure overnight and it would work, it would be hard. This has been a very long history of a country with enormous inequality and problems. I mean, one of the basic issues in the United States when it comes to economic and social rights is that over the last 30 years, average wages across the country have gone down. And so if you look at a chart of wages, what you see is a steady decline over time. But if you look at productivity, it's absolute ascending, right? So productivity of workers has gone up and their wages have gone down. So something is wrong. I mean, if what you're supposed to do is work hard to make more money, someone's working hard and someone else is making the money. So I think there needs to be real attention paid to what has happened to wages. I mean, again, going back to this idea of bias regulation, I mean, why is minimum wage so stagnant? I mean, to even buy the same good of a bag of goods that you could buy in 1980. I think 1980 the minimum wage was $3.50. To buy what you couldn't buy in 1980 for $3.50 would take you $15 now. And which means that people making minimum wage have had an absolute decline in their real wages, which means they have an absolute decline in their standard of living. So minimum wage, I mean, the problem is the executive branch being able to do any of this. I mean, but it needs to. And I'd say the second thing that the executive branch, I have to say, has done very poorly is explaining why the stimulus package, the Recovery Act, is a good thing. They've done such a bad job of it. I mean, so you know, the sort of the right wing keeps saying, well, you know, if you don't make enough money and you spend more than you make, that's wrong. And everyone's like, yeah, that's bad. But the government isn't your paycheck. I mean, the government should borrow money and spend it, because when they borrow money and spend it, it creates jobs that then gives them back money so they can balance their budget. So just, I think, what I would say for the executive branch, if anyone's listening, is just some better messaging on why stimulus money, job creation, all of this is for the overall health of the entire economy, And it's not this fear, I mean, this fear of debt is not just in the U.S., it's global, and I think much more in Europe than it is in the U.S. But I think explaining that and, you know, getting rid of the tax cuts for the very rich so that they can have some more money to spend so that there's job creation. And lastly, I'll say something which will never happen, but, you know, that's why civil society gets to say so, is industrial policy. Invest in industrial policy that creates the kind of jobs your economy needs, and not just sort of hope that the market will figure it out and we'll get the kind of jobs. But, I mean, that might never happen, but at least we can say it.
Ignacio, do you have anything to add to a sort of more comparative perspective, lessons learned from other countries?
Maybe just very much building on what Ajim and Radhika have said, and also harking back to my earlier point about ratification. I don't think we should let the administration off the hook in terms of the need to ratify and implement the covenant. I'm sure that's a long-term process. It can't happen overnight, but there might be immediate steps that will, you know, pretty prompt steps that could be taken along that path. I think all of the arguments that have been advanced can be demolished, or at least can be rebutted one by one, and as organizations in the US have been doing, I think, for many years, but maybe there's a need for a renewed aggressive attack on that front. One maybe more immediate thing that civil society organizations, both in the US and outside, could play with is the idea of pushing for some kind of baseline audit on economic and social rights. Building, I mean, including the kinds of issues that you were both talking about. But maybe the time is right to call for something like that. To kind of make the case, I mean, to do a proper systematic diagnosis, building on the great work that NGOs have done in the context of the UPR review, so we're building the foundations of that. But doing some kind of, you know, quite fact-based diagnosis of the state of economic and social rights in the US, because that can help build the argument as to why there is need for you know, greater legal and policy protection of these rights. And maybe subsequent to that, that could be a basis for pushing what you were pointing for in terms of getting the administration to pronounce itself, to say where it stands with regard to freedom from want. The US historically has been a champion for freedom from want. I mean, we need to constantly resurrect the Rooseveltian tradition, and you know, the Obama administration needs to position itself. I mean, the answer that my cousin and others gave just doesn't really stand up. Is freedom from want an American human rights value, or isn't it? And I think if we can push for some kind of statement of commitment to freedom from want in this administration, with an acknowledgement that freedom from want and human rights has a bearing on a whole range of areas of policy, including fiscal policy, including employment policy, including monetary policy, including financial regulation. That could be a huge breakthrough. I know it's not going to happen by March, but maybe March of next year, of 2012. But just some others.
Just one more thing that they could do before March is really make a commitment to support ratification of the Domestic Workers Convention. That's decent work that's being drafted and discussed right now at the ILO. And obviously the ILO Convention on Discrimination and Employment that many countries mentioned as well.
Thank you. Well, we did want to leave plenty of time for questions and answer and interaction with people from the floor. So we'll go ahead and get started. I don't know, Kate from Nesri, whether you had something you wanted to add on work or not. No.
The Nesri's position. Oh, do I push the button?
You see what Nesri is?
I don't know.
So Kate Caldwell from the National Economic Social Rights Institute.
Yeah, I don't really have a prepared statement, but I did place Nesri's fact sheets out on the table, and our report, which we submitted with a bunch of other groups, mostly our grassroots partner groups, really addresses the problem of the privatization of public goods and the treatment of public goods as commodities in the U.S. kind of broadly, and then looking at it in the areas of health, education, and housing, and then workers' rights as well, which plays into a lot of the things that you were saying. And I actually have a question as I was listening to you. I was really pleased to see this, what you prepared here with all the facts and figures, because as I was sitting there listening this morning, I was actually thinking that this is exactly what I wanted to hand out to everyone in that room. And maybe they do know this, and I just don't know that they know it. But I was thinking, is there an education process in the U.S. certainly, but also internationally, just for people to actually know the level of want that there is in the U.S. Because I think I've spoken to people from many countries while I've been here this week, and I realize that it's not that they don't care; they really don't know. And these are people that I would have thought would have known because they're human rights advocates that really are shocked to hear at the kind of. I mean, I work in the area of labor rights. They're shocked to hear that they're the lack of freedom of association in the U.S. certainly, but then sort of cases of modern day slavery and the situation of agricultural workers, domestic workers. People are actually genuinely surprised. And so I was just wondering to what degree, in terms of messaging back in the U.S. and abroad, what advice you all have when we go back and we're asked to speak to the media about this process, what the best strategy is for, do we want to educate by talking about facts and figures, or do we need to educate in terms of ratification? I mean, where to place I'm just scared that I'm going to get back and be asked to comment on this and want to do it. I've been watching TV in my hotel room and watching Obama responding to questions about the election, and he's really good at that. And some of us aren't as practiced at answering hard questions when things are turning against us politically. And I was just wondering what advice you have for those of us going back.